Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about the Penguin, episode 6. It's called Gold Summit. So spoilers for the episode as always. And obviously I came out of the last episode feeling like that was maybe a little bit weaker than the rest of them, just because it was more of a setup episode. This one is pretty great, and it has lots of little things in it as opposed to, I'd say, like one big thing. But those little things are all very well done, and there's a couple of really standout scenes in particular. We've got Sophia and Sal Maroni hunting Penguin, wanting to know where he is. I actually thought there'd be more of a time jump at the start of this episode, because the way Penguin was like narrating and talking to his men about the empire that they're building with this drug, with Bliss Underground, I thought at least a few weeks had passed, but there was actually a line later in the episode about how something only happened a few days ago, so it's not actually been that much time. But there's a standout scene with Penguin and his mother. There's a standout scene with Sophia and Eve, the girlfriend character, who I've only just noticed her last name is Carlo, like Basil Carlo, who's Clayface and is the shapeshifter. And it's kind of pointed out in this episode that she changes like outfits and hairs and disguises a lot. So it's kind of like a spiritual reference to Clayface, which is that's such a weird little Easter egg that I didn't see coming. I don't know if her last name was there before. I just noticed it before I started recording because it's in the IMDb list. Anyway, there's a scene between her and Sophia, which I think is probably the scene of the episode. I've completely forgotten to do my scene of the episode thing at the end ever since I started trying to do it, but I'm going to mention that now, that that's the scene of the episode. So I'll talk about that. And then obviously Vic has a big character moment in this episode, and there's a lot of nice little touches in this episode in terms of paying things off. One, for example, there's two related to Vic actually. One is that when he runs into Squid in this episode, and I guess I'll talk about that first, and ultimately he takes care of Squid on his own. He's going to go to Penguin for help, but Penguin's so distracted about what his mother's going through, and Vic kind of realizes that and can sense that Vic in the scene, when Penguin eventually kind of acknowledges that Vic was trying to tell him something about a guy who's going to be a problem, he says, oh hey, you mentioned there's a guy, there's a problem, and Vic chooses in the moment to say, you know what, no, forget about it, there's no problem. And Penguin's like, are you sure? And he's like, yep, no. And the implication being that Vic is going to take care of it on his own, which he does, and there's a tense scene where he tries to do it with money, he tries to pay off Squid. Squid wants to meet Penguin. Squid wants to be a part of the new thing. He wants to start making money because this is his neighborhood. Vic says there's an opening, but since it's your neighborhood, like he claims that Penguin's agreed to pay him off. Now that's not actually happened. Of course, Vic's just doing that himself out of his own money, presumably. And Squid gets offended, throws it back in his face, thinks he's a big shot, and ultimately Vic turns around and shoots him. And it's a pretty horrific scene. He shoots him in the sort of side of the neck. He takes a little while to die. Vic's kind of horrified looking at it. It's a big moment for him because he's just killed someone for the first time. It feels like a big evolution of his character. The two things that I really wanted to point out about Vic's character, of this story here, is one, that the first time Squid talks to him in this episode, he points out how good his shoes are. Like, oh, you're like a big money spender now. You've got like proper fancy sneakers now. And he's like, nah, they're not that fancy. Notably, after he's killed Squid and he's changed his clothes, the thing that he's forgotten or not noticed is that his shoes have blood on them. So the very thing that Squid pointed out has Squid's blood on them. That was a nice little setup and payoff to that, just to sort of like really kind of hit home that this is who he is now, especially since that entire conversation, or at least the way Squid approached them in that conversation, was very much about, hey, look at you now, you're a big shot now, you've changed, you've got all these things, you've got money. And him killing someone is kind of like the big exclamation point of him going through this change, that he really is someone different now. And that also leads to a genuinely great little moment where Penguin sees Vic a little bit later, and Vic's clearly shaken because he's done this, right? He's killed someone, he's feeling in shock. Penguin notices this and says, hey, you okay? That thing that was a problem, that guy, did you take care of it? And Vic kind of indicates yes, and Penguin says, did you get away clean? He can clearly see in Vic's face how it ended, right? He knows this is, Vic's murdered someone. And he holds him close tells him that this was the right thing to do and all the rest of it. But the thing that I really want to point out is that the whisper in the ear as he hugs him, it gets easier. Like, you are actually one of us now. You are a killer now. And like, I think that's really great. The other thing that I want to point out with Vic, and this ties into Sophia's story as well, but the cliffhanger of this episode, which is Sophia finding both Vic and Penguin's mother at the end of the episode, she is notably holding a crowbar, which doesn't mean anything specifically to Vic, but I'm sure when we did episode 1, I probably pointed out that Vic stealing the caps off of Penguin's car is very reminiscent of Jason Todd. Jason Todd, the second Robin, Batman met him because Jason Todd was stealing the caps off the Batmobile, and that's how that friendship started. And Batman took Jason Todd under his wing, and Penguin took Vic under his wing. No pun intended, because he's the Penguin. Those of you who don't know how Jason Todd's story ends, and it's not really ends because he came back, right? Because comic books and, you know, people coming back to life. But Jason Todd's story ended with the Joker beating him to death with a crowbar. Or a tire iron. But, yeah, it was a crowbar. I think it was a crowbar. But the point is, I don't think that's an accident. I don't think starting Vic's story exactly like Jason Todd and then threatening someone with a crowbar, possibly, like, ending his life. Because I don't think Vic, I think almost certainly is not making it out of the season alive, I don't think. I do think it'll ultimately be Penguin who does it, or at least turns on him enough that it leads to his death. At least that's what I've been assuming, because it seems like, oh, we're going to prove that Penguin really is a bastard because he doesn't really care about Vic either. Possibly he'll blame Vic for whatever's about to happen to his mother, but I thought that parallel with Jason Todd was just too juicy to ignore. Like, it's one of those things where, like, I enjoyed the cliffhanger. It was, okay, this is good, this is tense. Sophia has said repeatedly throughout this episode, Sal's been complaining about it, that Penguin doesn't have anyone that he cares about that they can hurt. Sal wants to do that because Penguin killed his family. Sophia obviously wants to do it because of Alberto. And they think there's no one that he cares about that much. And there's a whole, obviously, sidetrack with Eve, but for the most part, there's no one that he actually cares about that much. And here she stumbles on to Penguin's mother saying, oh, my boy Oz did it. He got the power on. Oz is, you know, the new kingpin of Gotham, or whatever she says. Like, but she's talking about Oz. There's no mistaking. Like, Sophia clearly sees and hears enough to know that this is Penguin's mother that he has been hiding. So the cliffhanger, like, you're too wrapped up in that. And presumably she's going to do something bad to her, and Penguin is going to maybe blame Vic for not being able to stop it. If Vic does indeed get away, which we don't know either. That's possible. They'll both die in this scene. But for drama, for maximum drama, I suspect that Vic might survive. Maybe even intentionally on Sophia's part as a message to Penguin or something. Like, there's possibilities. But you're so wrapped up in that cliffhanger that it took me a second to realize, like, the specifics of the crowbar. And the fact that his story started like Jason Todd, which makes me lean more towards she's going to beat the shit out of him with a crowbar. And he's going to die that way. So there's, like, satisfying conclusions down both paths. Which one the show takes, I don't know, but fun theorizing and talking about it anyway. So that stuff is really cool. The Sophia side of this plot is also really good, actually. One of the little things that they do early on is that she's having, like, kinky sex BDSM sessions with her therapist. Still not really sure how I feel about him as a character, but it's kind of a quick thing, and I did at least appreciate that he keeps trying to, like, say that he'll be there or be involved, and she's like, oh, so-and-so will show you out. Like, she kind of, like, just, like, tosses him to the side, which was at least a little bit satisfying. But it also feeds into this idea that comes up later in the episode, is that specifically when she meets Eve, and like I said, the scene where she meets Eve, which is quite a long scene, I think that is the scene of the episode for a lot of reasons, but one of them is when she's walking around Eve and kind of, like, making these guesses or impersonations of how Eve would be with Penguin. It's like, and basically the idea that Eve would talk him up, let him hear what he wants to hear. Oh, Oz, you're the best I've ever had. Oh, Oz, you know, your future is bright. You're going to take over this city, like that kind of thing, like buttering him up. And Sophia specifically points out that she used to have to lie to men like that, and Eve's like, oh, you don't have to anymore. And then Sophia immediately says, oh, you're just telling me what I want to hear now. You're just using the same skills on me to some extent. But I really like that moment on its own, just purely from the idea that she's right. I think one of the things that I really liked about this scene was just how much truth there was in everything. Like how much like what they were saying and how they reacted to things that each other was saying really felt like it was playing off who these characters were. And Eve's not been like a huge character. Eve's definitely been a side character who's just kind of popped into Ozzy's story occasionally. But what was so good about this is that when Eve kind of like takes the high ground a little bit and says, hey, these are the women you killed, and names off some of the hangman victims, and specifically points out that that's women that she knew. They were people that worked with her, or at least in the same circles, and she knew them. Sophia looks over and says, wait, you still think I'm the hangman? Wait, Oz never told you. And I think the reaction from Eve as Sophia explains that Penguin helped propagate the lie that she was the hangman to cover the fact that Carmine was killing these women so that he could continue killing these women, and those women, some of those women being friends of Eve, and that's why Penguin would never tell her that, because that would make her look, negatively on him, because he's actively helping. Like, this scene on its own has this character Eve make it very clear how much she cares about the girls that work for her, and that she tries to protect them. And even when she seemingly accepts that Sophia is going to kill her, she says, okay, whatever you're going to do to me, but this is not on my girls. You don't hurt them. And Sophia, like, I love that her reaction to that. Like, ultimately she doesn't shoot her, of course. She chooses not to. But the fact that she has her girls back and their girls have her back, that kind of loyalty is something that we know Sophia did not have in her family. And she even says that. Like, that's not like a great bit of analysis, because Sophia says that out loud. I'll never know what that is. Like, you think, because Eve made a dig about how, you were born into so much money that you can look at the world in black and white. You can look down on me for my profession, so on, so on. But Sophia says, no, yes, I may have been born into money, but I'll never know that. I'll never have that loyalty. I never did have that. And it's after that moment where she chooses to walk away and not share. Like, I love the character dynamics at play here between both of them. It's great that this scene, because Sophia's whole story in this show ultimately is that she was in a male-dominated world where she had to, like, say what they wanted to hear. She did all the right things. She played by their rules. And even the thought of, like, doing something that would go against them, right? And discovering that like, her mother had been killed by her father, and maybe even doing something about that, led to her being thrown under the bus by her father and everyone in the family. Like, she was just disregarded by all the men like it was nothing. And her big, empowering story since coming out of Arkham Asylum this season has been to take that power, fight against the criminal patriarchy, and put herself in that place of power. And I think this idea that Eve was actively hating her for being the hangman, for killing these women, Eve finding out that Sophia didn't do that, right, I think should have an impact. If everything Eve says is true about her caring about her girls, and this is why she always sided with Penguin, no matter how bad Penguin actually is, she wouldn't betray him. But I think Sophia not killing her, that's the final nail in the coffin to prove to Eve that Sophia isn't who Penguin's been helped convince her she is all this time. I mean, Penguin didn't come up with the lie of Sophia, but he helped propagate it, and he certainly, kept it going with Eve specifically because it benefits him for Eve to see her that way. It benefits Penguin for Eve to be scared of Sophia and to think of her as the psychopath or whatever. And this idea that moment of not shooting her is what changes Eve's mind to actually give up Penguin's location, and for Sophia to agree to keep it between them where that information came from. There was something really it's so weird to come out of a Penguin show that's about a crime family and it's a side character from Batman and come out of it going that the women characters are so well developed and so like strong in how they're written. Sophia mainly, of course, because she's the one that's had all the development. But I actually think throughout this scene, Eve's character got so fleshed out in so many ways, and how she stuck up for her girls, how she processed the new information that Sophia was giving her, and this idea that in the scene she is willing to turn on Penguin because she's realized that Penguin has helped cover up murder of people she cares about, which in turn means that he probably doesn't care about her as much as he claimed at the very least, right? So there's that, which is already hinted at in the scene. Even that moment at the start of the scene where Sophia says, "Has Penguin seen this version of you?" And this version of Eve is, she's in like in her joggers, or Americans call them sweatpants, right? She's wearing casual, hanging around the house clothes, right? No fancy makeup on, no dress, no wig, just lounging about. And she's like, "Has Penguin seen this version of you?" To which Eve says, "He's seen it a couple times, he doesn't care for it." Which immediately gives this idea that Penguin only likes her when she's presenting herself in a manner that he would find appealing, right? Which already puts a question mark on how much does he actually care about her, and how much does she have to play a role to fit into his ideal image and all that kind of thing. But by the end of the scene, she's realized who Penguin is. I think it's very convincing that Sophia has convinced her that she's not what she says she is. And in a weird way, despite the fact that Sophia is obviously a pretty vicious character in a lot of ways, by the end of the scene, it actually feels kind of empowering that these two women, on some level, like saw eye to eye by the end of the scene, and realizing how she's been lied to by a man around her, just in the same way that Sophia was being lied to by men around her for such a long time, offered up that information, in the subtext, or just in kind of like the motivation for it, does feel very. It feels weird to say it's women supporting women, but in a weird way, it kind of is. Like, it's not obviously spelling it out, and she's not standing up and saying any sort of grandiose statements or anything like that. But that is the motivation here: is that Penguin kind of deserves what's coming to him. And this scene is so convincing for me that she believes that by the end of the scene. That all it took was these two women in a room actually being honest about everything that had been happening. Because Eve, doesn't hold back about anything that she knows, other than Penguin's location, which she did kind of successfully lie about, and then offers up, even though, like, she could have not. Like, she could have just let Sophia walk out, and that would have been the end of it. It seemed like Sophia was letting it go. But hell, even Eve wanted her to come up here and talk to her, because she'd rather have a one-to-one face-off with her than have Sophia go through the other girls and all that. Like, yeah, the other girl, the cam girl that we knew from before, is the one that offers up where Eve is, but that was under Eve's orders. So, like, there's this level of just, there's so much depth to this scene, and it's been so well set up because it's so fueled by everything Sophia's been through with her family and her story and how she's gotten here, and that ultimately she doesn't want to kill Eve because she recognizes that Eve is just another woman who has been used by the men around her. And she's not going to hold a grudge against her, even after bringing up that Eve was the alibi for killing Alberto, which feels, then that's the moment where you feel like it's most likely that she's going to kill her, because, like, she was the alibi for Alberto, but still isn't enough. She still doesn't want to be the hangman. She clearly has no problem killing someone who deserves it. She's killed a lot of people already in her family, and she's obviously killed, or she's willing to kill, Penguin, at the very least, probably Penguin's mother and Vic. So, it's not like she's this goody two-shoes or anything like that, but there is a code here, and I do think that there's a lot of depth to these characters, Sophia especially, but even Eve, like I said, by the end of this scene, I think the way that she plays off of everything that Sophia says, there's so much truth in it. And I think that's what makes that so effective, when Sophia tells her, "Oh, Penguin helped cover up this lie, and that allowed Carmine to keep killing girls." Like, Eve's reaction to that really hit home, because Sophia is telling the absolute truth. And it's the sort of thing where I don't think it's ever come up in that context before, that by Penguin helping propagate that lie, he was helping Carmine continually murder more innocent women. that thinking about it that way never popped it in my head. It could have done if I'd thought about it in a certain way, and anyone watching could maybe think of it that way. But the show has not specifically pointed it out in that light. But as soon as Sophia does, you go, holy shit, she's right. Penguin's hands are kind of dirty here as far as even helping him murder anyone else. And, that goes back to the Batman movie. So I love this scene. This scene was like, the episode was good. This scene elevated it significantly for me because these characters were so well developed. And it's not even the only scene obviously worth mentioning with Sophia. Like before she even goes to Penguin's apartment, and there's a little joke about how even Sal thinks the fireplace and music is tacky and all that. There's a scene of them having dinner, right? Where she's just been in the therapy, she comes into the kitchen and Sal's making some I didn't catch what it was called, but he's making some dish that his wife taught him the recipe for. Some sort of stew that you put yogurt on at the end. But either way, he's making this. They're talking about stuff, and one of the things that sticks out here is that he's opened a bottle of wine that was in the kitchen that clearly Carmine or the family had been saving for a long time. And Sophia's like, "Oh, I can't believe you opened that." He's like, "I was just sitting, collecting dust." And she takes a sip, and it's like a moment of like really enjoying like the spoils of like, oh yeah, I'm in charge now. I can just drink this wine. Carmine, Alberto, Uncle, whoever, none of them are here to stop this. This is truly a display of the power we have now. Now on its own, that's not that big a deal, but what I really liked about it is at the end of the episode, when Penguin's making his big speech and doing his big play, which is one of the other big standout scenes of the episode, is Penguin gathers all of the crime bosses of the smaller gangs. The triads obviously aren't that small, but the triads, he's there, Francois Choi's there, and then you've got the Irish gang, you've got the gang of ladies, you've got another gang, there's some other gangs, some of whom I've seen in the show before in some way, some we haven't. But what really contrasted nice with that dinner scene with Sophia and Sal sharing a expensive bottle of wine as they plot and talk about how they want to deal with Penguin, and Sal gets a little emotional talking about his dead wife, so on and so on. Penguin hands out cheap cans of beer to everyone. And it's really setting up this idea that Penguin's actually saying in the scene is that, hey, we're the little guys, right? They're the old guard, they're the fancy rich ones who are doing all this stuff. But us, we are the people on the street. And the only thing that stops us from taking over and beating them is that we're all split up. So he basically tries to like get everyone to form a coalition, right? Like all the gangs, all the smaller gangs come together, and together they can outnumber the Maroni and Gigante regime. And that's kind of his plan. It's a very good scene, actually. It's Penguin trying to convince everyone of like, hey, I'm just a guy from the east side, blah 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 blah, and he talks about growing up. The guy from the Triads does try to kind of say, hey, Penguin murdered Alberto, he's turned on Sophia, he'll turn on anyone, we can't trust him. And Penguin sits down and he's like, you know what, yeah, you're right, I did kill Alberto. I did steal the drug from Sophia. This is all true. But kind of presents it as we can be better than this. And the thing that he compares it to is the politicians, like all the corrupt politicians who are rich and whatnot, is that they're in some fancy club right now making deals that benefit them and no one else. And they all hate each other. But they all work together because by working together, they control and run the entire city, and it gives them more power. It's not about them liking each other. So how about we start working like that? Because he points out that a lot of these gangs hate each other's guts. He reiterates that throughout the episode in some different scenes when he's talking to Vic and whatnot. And what I really liked about this episode's writing, actually, is that one of the scenes in the middle of the episode is Penguin is concerned about his mother because the power's off in Vic's neighborhood, and it's very cold. So he actually goes and kind of assaults the councilman or whoever it is that'll maybe have the pull to get the power turned back on, because all the rich neighborhoods have the power, but the poor neighborhoods, like Vic's neighborhood, do not. And again, it's kind of almost an analogy for what he's trying to do with the gangs. Is like, all the rich ones have all this, but we can take from that and make everything more equal and spread out. But what I liked about that, though, is that it actually gives us like someone to think about when he makes that speech at the end and he's talking about, oh, the rich politicians are making these deals. It's actually really smart that we as the audience got to see a little bit of that earlier. We don't get to hear the conversation, but before Penguin goes up and confronts this one guy, we see him with like a group of rich guys all in suits smoking cigars, and they're clearly laughing about how evil and powerful they are in the city's government. Like, we get a little sample of it, so that when Penguin says this at the end, it's not just something that's like theoretical. Like, yeah, you'd believe it because it's a very realistic thing to hear. But having seen a little bit of it and having seen Penguin actually go up and like, you know, coerce one of them into doing something for him and sort of like making him scared of him, it's a sign obviously that Penguin's willing to go higher up the food chain and sort of make power plays. But if nothing else, it like gives us the solid example that he's telling the truth when he says this. So as much as I do believe that Penguin would turn on any of these people at any time if the situation benefits him to do so, I do think everything he also says here is actually also true. Even if he will turn on them, even if that's also true, everything he says, his sales pitch is full of accuracy. And that gives it weight. It gives it weight in the scene. And it's a different kind of weight to the scene that the two ladies had, because that scene was like a lot more intense from their character in terms of like who they want to be, like how they've been held down and whatnot. Whereas this scene is a little bit lighter in the sense that it's just Penguin trying to like play the power game and try and convince all these people to work with him. But he does, and it's important for the plot. And notably, you know, the coat he's got in this episode looks a bit more like a coat that the Penguin would wear. It's got like kind of the fur, not fur, but like the more padded collar and stuff. And he's hobbling around. He's got the cigar. I didn't notice. I think the next episode's called Top Hat. No, it's not. Oh, it is the next episode. Yeah, it is the next episode. My eyes glanced at the wrong bit. Yeah, so I don't expect the whole episode's going to be about how he gets his top hat, because that feels like it's below what this show is doing in terms of writing quality. Like, that's the sort of thing that you'd get in an episode of a CW show, is like, we're going to do a whole episode about the origin of the top hat. But yeah, I expect like the top hat will come up somehow next episode, and it'll probably have some meaning or significance, and it'll work well into the themes of the show. So yeah, I thought that scene was also very good. And then like I said, the ending, which is Sophia having gotten the location from Eve, stumbles in and sees Vic and Penguin's mother. And Penguin's mother is in a much happier place now at the end of the episode, which is kind of tragic if she's going to die now, because earlier in the episode, of course, another sort of scene that I think people are going to talk about from this episode is where Penguin comes in and she's in the bathtub and she's in cold water and she's yelling for help. He helps her out, but it's clearly a struggle, and it becomes this conversation where she says she wants to die. She wants Penguin to help kill her because she doesn't want to become someone who just sits there like a vegetable. She doesn't want to become pathetic. These are, you know, the words she's using to describe how she sees what she'll become if she keeps going down this path. She knows that she's losing her cognitive functions, and she's aware of it, and she doesn't want it to get worse. She wants to go out now. And Penguin refuses repeatedly, but ultimately it says that he will do it. I don't think I believe him. I don't think he's actually ready to do it. I think he's saying it ultimately to you know, make her you know, willing to, you know, go along with what he's saying in the moment. But it's, you know, it's a stronger performance scene. I think the performances in the moment, like his acting and the way he like plays off these moments, and he tries to fob it away, like him actually finally saying yes, he'll do it, even if I don't believe him, does have quite a little bit of a dramatic punch to it, because it just the performance just sells it. I don't really know what else to say about it other than just the performances really make it work. So you got that there. There was a little bit earlier on as well where Vic tried to play along with her delusion and say that like the dead son was just out, and Penguin didn't like that. Penguin sort of like made it clear he was crossing a line there. I don't know if I've got much else to say about that yet, but that feels like it could be something we come back to, and just in a thematic sense, like, you know, is there a bigger way that Vic will maybe overstep for Penguin than maybe that we won't see coming, where Penguin's really going to turn on him? But that all kind of depends on what the outcome of this cliffhanger is going to be when we start off next week's episode. Very fascinating to see that. And obviously, it does that classic TV drama thing of going from Penguin at his happiest, where he's actually pulled it off. And they do a thing in that scene, actually, where all the gang leaders pledge to be a part of this with the beer, right? Because he's trying to convince them. He's eventually sitting there with a can of beer in his own hand, and he makes his sales pitch. He finishes, and he opens his beer. And then one by one, the way they all kind of vote to be a part of this, or sort of reveal that they're going to be involved, is that they all open their own cans. So you get just the sound of the cans opening becomes it's the equivalent of like the hands going up to volunteer in like a different, show or movie, right? You can imagine, oh, like we need volunteers to do a suicide mission, but it'll save the world, or we need everyone to agree to something to save someone's life. You can imagine the hands all going up, or them all saying "I'm in." Here, they do it with the beer. They do it with the that little sound, the click and the hiss of the beer, one after another, and then ultimately, the triad boss, Francois. That's his real name. That's not his character's name. He, is the last one to do it. He kind of like is willing to go in and. Well, technically his two like underlings are the last ones to do it, but they don't do it until he does it. But he's the last one making the decision to do it. So Penguin, like the little smile that he gives before he takes a sip of his beer, like he's pulled this off, is very good. Because actually, so yeah, you've got the drama of like going from he's happiest to here's the danger of what's going to happen next week. I want to rewind though a little bit to a scene earlier on. It's right after the opening when Vic arrives and Penguin is talking to everyone. I think maybe even a little bit in the middle, because he has an idea in the middle to give away Bliss for free for one day, just to make the demand super high. Because I mean, I've kind of glossed over it, but there was a bit in the middle where Sophia and Sal killed a couple of gang members from, I think it's the Irish gang, because they were selling Bliss. The idea being that anyone who's caught selling Bliss will be killed by their crime family to scare everyone out of it. And Penguin's retaliation for that is to give it away for free for a day, just so that everyone wants it and there's nothing, it's too widespread to have something. Anyway, I don't really want to talk about that. It's fine. I mean, it's fine. It's good. It's whatever. But when he's making a speech to all these men, and earlier when he's talking to Vic, the ideas that started all the way back in episode 1, when he was talking to Alberto, and he told that story about like the crime boss that he respected, and he's like, oh yeah, I remember that guy, and everyone, they knew him, they respected him, he took care of the street, and everyone treated him like a father figure. And Alberto made fun of him, right? And that's the moment where Penguin shot him. That I feel like that was kind of coming back up in this episode when Penguin's talking to Vic, and he's like, hey, people are going to remember us. They're going to be telling stories about Oz Cobb and Vic. They're going to respect us. We're going to, like, our names are going to last a lot longer than we are. He's basically saying he hopes people tell stories about him the way that he told stories about that guy on the street. Like, and that's something we knew Penguin wanted from that very first scene. The show made that clear. And I think the reason why it comes back up in this episode from a writing technique point of view is that he feels like he's getting close to it. He feels like by having this underground system with the Bliss, and they had the 2 barrels, and they've been able to grow them, and it's going well. He feels like he's kind of starting to be on top of the world. Of course, there's a lot of things that will still stop it. There's a lot of, antagonists for him that will still get in the way. But he's starting to taste like that thing that he's always wanted. So he's starting to talk about it more. He's starting to like say it to Vic. He's starting to bring it up. He feels like he's getting close. So super well done, and just bringing that back up. And then him sort of achieving this big milestone at the end where he's kind of made himself the boss of like a gang coalition, which if they win and beat the Maroney and Garibaldi family union, then ultimately like effectively makes him the main crime boss in the city. And that's kind of wild that he's able to catapult up to there. But the scene where he pulls it off is very good. So no, excellent. It was a very good episode. Any slight kind of like complaints about last week's being a little bit of a lower key episode is long forgotten about at this point. This episode was great, and this scene in particular with Eve and Sophia I thought was extremely well done. From a obviously the performances were great, but the writing especially, and how just well established everything Sophia's went through, about how she's felt about how her family treated her, about the crime she was accused of and blamed for, and how that influences every decision she makes in that scene, and how everything she reveals influences the decisions that Eve makes in that scene, and how these two well-established characters then play off of each other, all feels so satisfying because all of it makes complete sense. So, excellent stuff. So that's my thoughts on this week's Penguin. We got 2 more left, I think. Yeah, it's only an 8-episode show. So, expecting big things from next week. So let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments. And of course, you can support the show and support all the reviews both here and over in the Mail Fuzz Movies channel, where all the movie podcasts go. You can find the Batman reviewed over there, for example. You can support all of that at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep all the content coming. Wouldn't be able to do all these reviews without the support from those avenues. But you can also like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. All those things help out too. So thank you very much. I'll see you next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?